why they do it, it's cruel. So when you go and you're trying to pick which ones you want to do, if you really like the line references or you really like the lead words, just look and see what there is. So that plays into your decision of where to start. Looking at your questions again, what else do you notice about those line numbers?
They all relate to something.
Okay, they're all linked to something, so we're going to use, again, we're using those.
They're like a sentence long.
Okay, they may be a sentence long. One really big, important step. Another huge strategy. They all go in order. Okay, so 14 says line 41. 15 doesn't have a line, 16, 17, they don't have lines. But 18 does, it's 73. That means I know 15, 16, and 17 fall between 41 and 73. So when I'm not reading a passage, I still know exactly where to look. They don't go back and forth. They go in order. Another important thing, to talk about the ACT real quick. The ACT doesn't work this way. They don't go in order. They still have line references, they still have lead words, but they don't go in order. So you can't use their placement to give you that guide. Okay, so we're going to use those shortly. We are now going to start working through the basic 5-step approach. And so, to begin, we're just backing up a step and saying, okay, we're sitting down, we're picking our passage by considering each of these things. So we've picked our passage, now we begin. These erasers don't work well. This cloth works really good, but it's pretty slow. Someone just gave it to me at school today, so to try it. Okay. Step 1. We'll do this. The basic approach to reading. And step 1, you will have already done it, is to read the blurb. You're not reading the passage, but you need to read the blurb. And I'll put this here. You don't have to write it again if you don't want to, but identify type and topic. That's what you're getting by reading the blurb. So at the top of page 28, you're going to do that. So right now, you're going to want to be flipping back and forth between page 25 and 28 because we're going to do practice with that actual passage. So it tells us, step 1, read the blurb. So your job, and you're going to write right in your book here, read the blurb at the beginning of the passage on page 25. Based on the blurb, is it literature, history, social studies, or science? And then what will the passage be about? So you can write your answers right in your book. Where do you write it? Page 28. At the top of it, there's like little lines for it. So what did you determine the top type to be? History, says it's from the history department. And what is it about?
Windshield pitting.
Yep, the windshield fitting mystery. Alright, so you get to take that information and say, well, you would if I wasn't telling you to do it, but you would say, is this something I'm interested in? Is this where I'm starting? That's step 1. Step 2 is broken into a couple steps. So the first part is select a question. So you're going to turn back one page and look at those questions. And let's start with number 11 and see if we can answer it. The central claim of the passage is, can I answer the central claim, or do I know anything about the passage at this point? Okay, probably not, because I haven't read anything. So, when I say select a question, you are going to skip all general questions. Okay, we know it's general because it says central claim. The theme might say something like overall, or the most common one will be based on the passage. You can't answer this because you haven't read the passage. You don't know anything except for what the blurb said. So you're going to skip the general questions. Now, I need to say this. The general questions are either the very beginning or the very end. And I'm going to put these numbers here, but I don't want them to confuse you. It could be up to the first 3 questions. It might only be the first one. It might be the first and second. It might be the first, second, third. They're not mixed in. They're either at the very beginning or they're at the very end. So when you see number 11, the central claim of the passage, you say, I can't answer that. I skip it. I'll come back at the end. Then you get to number 12. See how in number 12 I have line numbers now? It tells me exactly where to look. That's called a specific question. So when I say select a question, that's what I'm doing. I'm skipping my general. I'm picking the question I'm going to start with, which will then be in order. Okay? And then the second half, so select a question, and the second half is and understand. And what that means is to understand the question, turn it into a question. Who, what, any of these question words. So there's, 52 reading questions, but they're not actually posed as questions. They're usually written as a statement. And it doesn't really make that much sense, but it is so much easier to find an answer to a question rather than just see a statement in there. So at the bottom of page 29, you guys are going to do this. It says, it gives you the question for number 12. right there. You don't have to flip back. And all I want you to do is turn it into a question. It says, what is this question asking? So I want to be clear that you don't necessarily need to have every word in there. You can paraphrase, you can shorten. So I want you to turn question 12 right in your book there into a question. All right, what's it asking?
Why?
Why? And you can take out extra, okay? So we can say, why did the author mention the Canadian scientist and the Utah resident, and get rid of your lines? You're not actually even writing this down. You're thinking it in your head. So you can just say, why did they mention, right? No one cares if you specifically say the author. Or just, why was the Canadian, like that's probably the route I would take. Why was the Canadian scientist or why were the Canadian scientist and the Utah resident mentioned? So take all the extra stuff out. This one, some of these you're going to simplify so much when you turn it into a question in your head. Okay? You never have to write it on paper. We're not wanting to spend ridiculous amounts of time here. We're just wanting to take the time to understand the question. Okay, then we get to step 3. And step 3 says, read what you need. So this is the first time we're actually going to look at the passage. We're going to do it in a second. So we're going to figure out what we need. If you're given a line number, so line 22, you read 5 lines above through 5 lines below. If instead you're given a lead word, you only need to read 3 lines above, 3 lines below. So you don't need as much context when you're given a word. And I'm just going to put a note here that you never need to go into a different paragraph. That'll change like the direction and the context. So even if reading Like, let's say your line number starts a paragraph, you don't have to go 5 up. You would just go 5 down. Okay. What I want you to do here is flip back. Actually, I'll have you flip in a second, but do what it says at the bottom of page 30 first. So it gives you the question again, and it wants you to answer what are the line references, and then what lines do you need to find the answer. So write that right in there, and then I'm going to have you flip back. So what are your actual line references in this question? Well, this is the easiest question to
17
answer.
and 31.
Okay, so the line references are 22 and 26. The lines you need to read are 17 through 31. What I want you guys to do is when you're given those line numbers, I want you to go into your passage and create it, see? So for me, you're going to need to do it in a minute anyway. But if I know it's 17 to 31, I go and I put a box from 17 to 31. So I know exactly where I would need to look for that question. So you can mark up your papers as much as you want and your tests as much as you want. But go identify where you should be reading so that you know that you're not, this will help you to see if it goes into a different paragraph or not and where you should stop. Okay. So then we get to step 4. In your book, it says the word predict. I get rid of the word predict every time because we're not actually predicting anything. Instead, we're finding the answer. Okay? Remember how earlier I gave you the example about the sky being blue? And how we're not actually allowed to bring any knowledge to the situation. Instead, we just have to find the answer. So I linked 3 and 4 together because I recognize, okay, I made my line window. Now I'm going to read it. And as I'm reading, I'm going to be looking for the answer. Okay? And what you're going to do is when you think you find it, underline what you think it is. And again, you don't have to underline if that doesn't work for you. But especially as I'm walking through and modeling this, I'll ask you what did you underline or what jumped out. So, this gives you the question. We already know rephrased. We want to know, why did the author mention the Canadian scientist and the Utah resident? So we're going to go to those lines, 17 through 31, read it, see if you can find the answer. If you think you find it, underline it. If you think you find pieces that help you find it, underline those pieces. Do what you can to identify the answer between 17 and 31. Does anybody want to tell me what they underlined? Okay. I'll tell you what people usually say, by the way. The other group of kids on Sunday are so noisy. This is as far as we got, and we still have a half hour left. I usually get farther than this, but that's like a full 30 minutes. You must not be surprised. I think
No.
those of you who know people from St. Albans, it's Emma, Archambault, Rowan, Oregon, Genevieve, Heather,
Especially when they're all friends as well.
Molly,
They all know each other.
Drew. They're all, well, when they all asked to take the class, I put them in the same group because I was like, you are not sabotaging all of my groups with all of your talking. Like, you can go in one group and you guys can deal. So it's totally different. There's a lot of talking. Okay, so the things that people underline frequently. The first major thing, and actually the correct thing, would be the quote that says, new reports of mysterious windshield fittings came in today, almost as fast as theories about what causes them. So there's the quote in there. The other things that people usually underline is exactly at line 22 and 26 where these people were mentioned. So a Canadian scientist posited that the marks were made by the skeletons of minute marine creatures. Or, in Utah, someone suggested that acid from flying bugs might be the source of the windshield denting. Okay, so now, let's say you underline either of those things. We're going to flip all the way ahead to page 32 at the bottom, where we're going to start using what we underlined for step 5, which is the process of elimination. Okay, so this is the first time, and this is tricky. I want you to do your best to not ever go look at the answers until now. Because a lot of times, if you look at the answers when you read the question, you start trying to make those connections. And remember that we don't want to make connections. We just want to find the answer. Connections are going to be tricks. So we just want to identify the answer. Okay, so at the bottom of page 32, we see these answers. What we're going to do is just read A, B, C, and D. If you think you like it, put a little check mark next to keep. If you think it's totally wrong, put a check mark next to eliminate, based on the question and the things I just talked about underlining. Okay. So, who wants to tell me what they got rid of? Any answer that we can discuss? Yes?
You can immediately get rid of C.
C. Why? You're correct, but why?
Because something's proved.
Good. This is my favorite response because you always know it's wrong. And they always say prove. You're not proving anything on this SAT. Nobody is in this article. Okay? To prove something, you need like years of tests and thousands of tests, especially to say to prove a theory. So anytime it tells you you're proving something, eliminate it. It's not the right answer. Okay? Just like this, they like to throw in words that sound good, right? We think, oh, this sounds good. Or how many of you are like, That one sounds smart. Do you know what I mean when you read a response, you're like, that sounds like the best response. They put those in there to trick you, right? You're going to look for those and not pick those. So we're going to get rid of C. Anything else you're really comfortable getting rid of? Yeah.
I mean, you can get rid of B because it asks for the reason why they put both in, and it only disputed one of the claims.
Perfect. This is another problem. A lot of times there's like half is right, half is wrong. And so this one says dispute claims made by experts. And it says that the Canadian scientist, maybe you consider they're an expert because they're a scientist. And then the Utah resident is just a normal man. And it actually says like a biologist disproved him. But there's not really anyone saying, okay, both of these guys are disputing claims made by experts. So that's not fully correct. So we're going to get rid of B. Now, I'm going to tell you that the correct answer is A. And people don't like choosing A because it's so literal. Notice it has nothing to do with content. All it is about its location in the passage. Provide support for a previous statement. If you underline the part I told you was the correct thing to underline, the quote, news reports came in about mysterious causes. And then that was line. So if you underline at line 20, new reports of mysterious wind chill pittings came in today almost as fast as theories about what causes them. Then line 22 is the scientist, line 26 is the Utah resident. And this answer says it provides support for a previous statement. It is that literal on this test. Okay? The previous statement was line 20. They were at 22 and 26. And D is the perfect example of what sounds really smart. But we don't really know if this is a phenomenon. Right? The unprecedented nature of a phenomenon. So we want to be careful for things like that. It says somewhere in the passage the word phenomenon, I believe.
It says mysterious manner, like right before the
Oh, I see.
5.
And if you look, and so I want you to, it says it, yeah, at 17 in a mysterious manner. And if you read too much, so this is another thing that we're going to just get practice with. If you read too much, you might try and connect to different things. Don't read outside of your window. They actually put the word phenomenon in at line 40. So if you kept reading and you didn't create a line window, you could pull context from other places. Stay in your window. Okay. So the correct answer to that is A. Okay. Let me erase this stuff for a minute. Do any of you have Irish families that are going to have you eat corned beef and hash tomorrow? You do?
What?
Gross.
It's St. Patrick's Day.
Oh,
My mom loves powder. It's gross.
you're Irish?
Yeah.
I don't think I've
How
ever
have
tried
I not
boiled
known
cabbage.
I don't know. I'm pretty pale. So,
I don't know anything about the Irish.
my dad looks very Irish. Just look
I've never seen your dad.
You've definitely
I've
seen
only
my
seen your
dad.
mom.
Yeah, I've never even put that.
No, I've only seen your mom. Because you only show pictures of your mom.
You know what my dad
Only
looks like,
because we
though?
share the same birthday. That's why you show me pictures of your mom.
I didn't know what your parents look like.
You've met my parents.
You met my parents.
I don't remember your dad. That's all I'm saying.
You were to think of a real life.
Is your
You-
dad Irish?
You made fun of my dad's
No.
name.
No?
He kind of celebrates it though, but
And
he's
Jake,
not.
you and Jake were like,
Does he celebrate everything?
Yeah.
He doesn't need a
What does
reason.
he
Come
say?
on.
He looks- Yeah, you know.
what? No, I don't.
Okay, so now we're going to just kind of connect this a little bit. So at the bottom of page 33, we're going to talk about just some more practice problems. The first thing on 33 just says infer, imply, suggest. They like those words. You are not actually allowed to infer, imply, or suggest. They put them on there, but remember, you are not allowed to have your own opinion. You are not, on the SAT, you are not allowed to make connections. You have to find the answer. So even if the question says, hey, what's implied by this? It's not like, what does it mean? You still have to find the answer. You are not allowed to make connections. So on page 34, you have this first question here. What you're going to do, we're going to just talk out loud the steps, and then you're going to try and figure out the answer. So number 13, the statement. Remember, like I said, they're questions, but they're not worded as questions. The author's statement that the country moved on to building backyard fallout shelters implies that Americans. So because the word imply, we're not using that. We're turning it into a question. Don't leave those in there to confuse you. So we know that we're doing this question. The second half is to turn it into an actual question. How do you want to rephrase this? How should we rephrase it? Make it easy. There's a lot of words there that don't need to be there. We're on page 34.
Do you want us to answer?
Yeah, go ahead and say it out loud.
What does, I don't know, read the quote.
Easier.
The quote.
Don't make
imply-
it that hard. Make it even simpler.
The quote implies. The quote.
No, you were closer the first time because you want the W question word there. But take the quote and the author out of it. Okay, so to simplify this as short as we can make it, so it's just easy to think it, why did the country move on to building backyard fallout shelters? See how we take out why did they probably do it, which the word implies would mean. We just want to know exactly why they did it. We want to find the answer to why. Okay? So we turn it into that question, why does the country move on to building backyard fallout shelters? Then it gives us line numbers, 31 through 32. So what am I actually reading? What's the window?
26, 30.
Quote.
Good. 26 to 37. So when we flip all the way back and we mark 26 and we start going to 37, we realize we don't have to go that far because we don't go into new paragraphs. So you actually only need to mark 26 through 32. So that's what you mark. Now you're going to read it and look for the answer. This step is to find the answer. The question again, why did the country move on to building backyard fallout shelters? We're not looking at our answers yet. We are just reading, and if we can, we're underlining the answer. All right, did anybody underline something you want to tell me? So realistically, the only part that really matches is that very last line. The country moved on to building backyard fallout shelters. Like, it's okay that you underline exactly what the quote is, because the rest doesn't really go with it. So now we go to our answer choices and use POE, process of elimination. I want you to read these answer choices. Get rid of it if you think it's wrong. Don't do anything if you're not sure. And I want you to remember, it's not you making connections. It's what that underlined part tells you only. So what do we want to eliminate? What do you not like? Okay, I don't like C or D. They needed a place to be protected from nuclear fallout. Number one, did it mention nuclear fallout in that line window? No, get rid of it. D, did not yet have fallout shelters in their backyard. No, doesn't say that either. Now you have to be careful, right? Because why would they build fallout shelters if those things weren't true? That's what we might want to ask ourselves. But we are not allowed to make connections. We are not allowed to have opinions on it. All we know is that line that we underline, or that entire line window, didn't talk about either of those things. When it comes to A and B, same story. A says, we're aware that the threat from bombs was more imminent than that from windshield pitting. Did it mention bombs anywhere? No, so we get rid of A. Even though we're still in our mind saying, why on earth would they be making these? It doesn't matter, because in the passage they're not mentioned. But B has to be the right answer. They had lost interest in the windshield pitting phenomenon. The word moved on, that was in the very quote that they put on here, moved on is the same as lost interest. And that's how we find that answer and support it. Okay, so that one is B. Okay, again, the hardest part, because like I said, we could talk about each of those options and we could make them fit if we were allowed to support our answer. But without supporting our answer, we have to have only the passage tell us what the answer is. All right, so the next thing is called vocab in context. Okay, it just means that we get a word in there. And that word is in the passage. So when they had you put the notes on the board, I said, if it's a word in context, you only have to read 3 up and 3 down instead. So number 14 gives you line 41. And it says common most nearly means. So turn it into a question. What does common mean? And this time you only need to go 3 up and 3 down. Anything you want? Oh, this is what I should tell you. I don't think I need to write it down. Over there, where you find the word common, cross it right out. Okay? So you're going to cross it out, and then you're going to read before and after it, and using your line window, then you're going to say, okay, these are the important things. Which of my answer choices will fit in that spot instead of common? What do you see as key words in that line window?
Infrequent.
Infrequent is there, okay. I have that one circled. That jumped out to me when I read it. We see the word numbers, So basically, I know if I have more people, any phenomenon starts to appear more blank. If you focus on that event or behavior, you can see the word trend up ahead. And so what we start to notice is it's talking about, like if I were to replace that with any word, I might replace it with something like, any phenomenon starts to appear more often if you focus on one event or behavior. And then I think, okay, go to my answer choices and I see which one of those would fit there. I would imagine you would, without question, get rid of A and D. Those are definitely wrong. But if you're stuck between popular and frequent, think about it. All those words I just suggested to you had to do with numbers. And it even said infrequent in it. And it said it as an opposite. So our correct answer here is C. Okay. Number 15 is similar. It doesn't give us a line number. Totally fine. We know it has to come after line 41 because of its placement. So the passage indicates that an effect of aggregating events. So, as a question, what kind of question do I turn that into? Right? Let's turn that into a question before you go look for the answer. And this is an example of one where I would try and make in easier words. So you could say, what is the effect of aggregating events? But I think when I flip it and say, what happens when you aggregate events? That's like an easier just word to hear. So we're looking after line 41 for the words aggregating events. Once you find it, you create your window. The passage indicates that an effect of, so then I'm looking for what happens when I aggregate events around line 41. Once you've found it and you think you've underlined what helps you, come back and use the process of elimination. So aggregating events, wait, did I say that right? Aggregating events happens at line 44. Okay, we're going to read 41 to 47. So it's something like, any phenomenon starts to appear more common if you focus on one event or behavior. Even something that is very infrequent may start to appear to be a trend when you aggregate those events. That answers my question right there. What happens when you aggregate events? So it answers there, but I'll keep going. There are millions of cars in Washington state, but thousands of cases of pitting. So when we go back over here, we are looking, what do I want to get rid of? B and C. We're not talking about a conspiracy. Don't make connections, right? So we're going to get rid of B. Now, a lot of people choose C. And the reason they choose C is because if you read that next line, or you kept reading, it says there's millions of cars in Washington state, but thousands of cases of pitting. This turns out to be less than 1%. So if you overread, you might choose C. But that's specific to the windshield pitting. That is not, this is a general question. What happens when you aggregate events? So it's not going to be C there. So either A or D could link there some way, but there is an important word. Remember, we're finding the answers. The word here that tells us is the word trend. Right? It says, if you start, even something infrequent may start to appear to be a trend. A trend is the same as a pattern, which makes that answer A. Okay? Okay. One last question for today. So we're jumping, we just did number 15. We're jumping to number 18. And this one says the author most likely mentions War of the Worlds. Again, it's italicized. It's like a vocab word. So why does the author mention War of the Worlds? In line 73. Go make your line window. Go look for your go find your answer. Come back and do POE. All right, so this one has a shorter line window because of the way that the paragraphs line up. So we need to read only 73 through 78. And we're looking for why does the author mention the War of the Worlds? So War of the Worlds is a wonderful example of how the media emphasizes the few real cases of hysteria without recognizing that the vast majority of people knew the radio program was fictional and did nothing. Rohel adds, like crop circles, we know some of them are man-made, so might these pits. First of all, do you know what it means when they put those different quotation marks in a passage like that? Okay, that means sarcasm. So they're trying to actually pick on this. Say, War of the Worlds is a wonderful example of how it emphasizes a few real cases of hysteria. Okay, so it's joking, it's picking on this. It's like, oh, they're not actually real. So when we go to these questions, what do you want to cross out?
A.
Okay, A. Now it's important that we understand those quotation marks, because if we don't, we might think that they are talking real cases. So they're saying some cases of mass hysteria are legitimate, which isn't correct. Again, they're not actual real cases. So it's saying there were a few real cases of hysteria, but the key part of that is without recognizing the vast majority of people knew it was fictional. Fictional means false, and did nothing. Okay, do you like B? What's wrong with B?
This is proof.
It says prove. There's a free elimination question there all the time. All right, so we have two more. Did the media point out that most people were not upset, or did it, the word world point out that most people were not upset, or did it criticize the media for failing to recognize the program was fictional? So a lot of people like D, but D is wrong. Because who didn't know the program was fake?
The people.
The people. Right? It says criticize the media for failing to recognize. The media knew it was fake. Okay? So instead, it said in that line window, the vast majority of people knew the radio program was fictional and did nothing. So most people were not upset by the broadcast. Right? The majority of people and most people here. So we're finding our answers in those line windows. Okay. So next week we're going to do the missing pieces of the windshield pitting mystery. But for homework, I'm giving you this. I wrote it on the board. It's page 80. It's only 10 questions. I want you to use these strategies that we just went over. There's 2 drills. You're only doing 1. Okay? I want you to take as long as you need because I'm more concerned about your own pacing, your own food. But on the test, if you were just trying to get it done, you would have approximately 13 minutes per passage. So that's just a ballpark for you to know how much time it would take to do it.
Wait, page 80, 10 questions?
There's only 10 questions, yeah.